Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. This week I thought I'd share 10 of my favourite art books that are a part of my collection. I have quite an extensive art book collection and you guys have been requesting me to show off some of these for quite a while, and I thought I'd show 10 of my favourite, which I believe is a must for anybody's collection. Now the first I have here is The Art of Over the Garden Wall. If you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall series, I highly recommend it, not only for excellent character design but absolutely wonderful background work. Since I have been trying to push to do a lot more background work lately, I've been finding myself inspired by backgrounds, and this ended up in my collection about a year and a half ago. And one thing that I really love about seeing art books is seeing the process of how an idea goes from forming the pitch of a show to the finalized product. And I love seeing how backgrounds are done, what elements they use. I like seeing the storyboarding. I adore storyboarding, and in particular I really love the backgrounds in Over the Garden Wall. It's just such a wonderful autumnal feel to a lot of it, and it's such a wonderful show. I highly recommend it to anyone, but this is definitely a must for anyone's collection just because of the detail of a lot of the backgrounds and how they talk about a lot of the character design. It's a bit of a unusual show, and this is one of the reasons why I highly recommend it, just because it is just so wonderful to look at. I'm not going to show all the books, like every little bit of these books in this video, but I figured I'd show you a little bit sneak peek to see whether or not you'd be interested in it. Honestly, it's a must-have for anybody's collection. It is just absolutely wonderful, this show. And yeah. Next in my collection is the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance art book. Now unfortunately I don't have the art book for the Dark Crystal. It is fairly expensive, and it's one of my ones that I'm currently saving up for. I treat myself to about 3 to 4 art books a year, and I slowly save up for the ones that I really want for my collection. There's quite a few that I really want, but Age of Resistance, if you have not watched it, if you've not watched Dark Crystal is one of the most influential series for me and my work. I'm a high fantasy nerd. I absolutely love fantasy based art, and I love puppetry as well. I really like a lot of the physical effects that are done in Dark Crystal. So when Age of Resistance came out, I absolutely fell in love, not only with the creature design, because this is what this really touches on this, but the use of colour, the costuming, the puppetry. It is such a phenomenal series. If you have not seen it yet, I highly and utterly recommend it. But one of the things I really like about this book is not only does it touch massively on how the creation of the puppets are made and the detailing of the show and how they went from storyboards to the finalized product. It's just fascinating to see like the concept work, considering the show has an excellent use of colour. It's got such a wonderful colour story to it, and it is 100% inspirational. I absolutely love this show, and this art book is just it's a treat to look at. I really love seeing the concept work, and I highly recommend it to anyone, especially if you want to see really beautifully done fantasy art and character design work. Next up in the collection is Spiderverse. I fell in love with this film last year. This came into my collection last Christmas. When we went to go and see Spiderverse, I came out of that cinema and immediately ordered the art book, because that film, each shot is like a still from the most beautiful illustrated book I've ever seen, and I really wanted to know how the creation from concept to the finalized work, and I wanted to understand a bit more about how the show was made, and this art book really touches on that. It goes through the character design concepts that they had. It goes from like the rough sketches to the beautifully designed concept work that they ended up doing, and it is highly recommended from me, especially if you want to see the backgrounds that they did. I'm going to keep gushing over background work just because it is something that I have really been wanting to work on personally for myself, and I really like to see color stories within animation to understand how they've gone from the start to the finish. And storyboarding, I really like to see storyboarding. You're going to hear me keep on reiterating things again and again, but it's really fascinating to see the beginning product to the end product, and this is a book that I 100% recommend to anyone. If you haven't seen Spiderverse yet, from one animation lover to another, please go and watch it. It is such a beautiful, moving storybook. It is phenomenal from an animation point of view, also as well from an art illustration point of view. It is just such a beautiful piece of animation. I love animation to pieces, and if there is a show that particularly moves me, I'll have to get the book to understand more from concept to finalized product. So next up in the collection that I will recommend is D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons, the Art and Arcana. If you are a massive fantasy based artist, I recommend this book to anyone, even if you are not a fan of Dungeons and Dragons. And the reason being is this shows the growth in fantasy art over years, and it is such a delight to see. It's really fascinating to see how Dungeons and Dragons ended up being from a simple pamphlet book that this guy and his friends made to a finalized, finished, wonderful product that we have today. Considering there's been 5 editions of D&D, but I think there's been way more than that, and it's constantly being updated by Wizard of the Coast. It is phenomenal to look through this book. In particular, the reason why I like it is because I like to see the growth of art and how art changes over time. So you can see how early influences of fantasy art have grown to what they are today. And it is very interesting. It is a fantastic read to anyone. It is so wonderful to look at, and you can see like the growth of certain characters, how they've changed over the years, how stuff has influenced them. It went from this beautiful detailed line work to airbrushing to the phenomenal digital oil-based painting work that you see today. It is such a story of illustration and how illustration has changed over the years, and it is highly recommended to anyone, not only if you are wanting to see beautiful, gorgeous art, but if you want to see the growth of fantasy based art as well. It is phenomenal to see. Also, one thing that did make me giggle in here is in the beginning you see a post that says I can play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and then there's the Critical Role poster. And if you don't know, I'm a huge fan of Critical Role, and it just made me laugh an awful lot. But this is a must-have for anyone's fantasy art book collection. I highly recommend it. It is just such a beautiful read. Now, speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, the next one I'm going to show you is not one but 2 books, and these are the Chronicles of Exandria, and these are art books to do with Critical Role. Now, this is a collection of fan work from over the years from a massive amount of artists in the community for Critical Role, and this is organised by Liam O'Brien and Taliesin Jaffe, and it is phenomenal. If you want to see a wide variety of artwork, and even if you are not a fan of Critical Role, there is such a beautiful array of styles in here. It's really inspiring to look at. I really like seeing stuff go from like very simple character design to heavily rendered beautiful pieces. Now, I'm not going to show a massive amount of what's in here because spoilers, of course. There's over 200 episodes of Critical Role if you count the first and second season now, and that's quite a lot for people to get through. But this is just Art of Campaign 1. Now, I have pre-ordered the Art of Campaign 2 just because I need it in my collection. I need it to grow my collection. But if I'm ever in a rut, I love looking through my art books, and these are an excellent way of not only looking at character design, but there is some beautiful background work in here. This work in particular I am an absolute fan of. Just heavy line work and just detail. This is actually one of my favorite artists. His line work is phenomenal. I will leave a link to all the books down below and where you can get them, but it is so inspiring to look at. Look at that spread. It's just, I could gush over these art books forever. But it is such a wave that you can look at these books and feel inspired, and I really like to see the execution of lots of different ways. Oh, look, it's Wendy Doodles. But it is just such a large array of work that it is very, very inspiring to me. And all of these books are a massive inspiration to me. Every single art book in my collection, I have got them because the show not only inspires me, or the work not only inspires me, but I can highly recommend them to other people. Now, next is a book from a Kickstarter I backed, The Art of Hikala. Now, I probably am pronouncing that incorrectly. I 100% apologise, but her work is a massive inspiration to me. Her use of watercolour in particular is just, my mind blows every time I see it. The fact that she paints with inks and the fact that she paints with watercolours. I take a lot of inspiration from Hikala when I'm looking at watercolours. Hikala and Kadora in particular are two artists I really look up to for watercolour based work, and it's really interesting to see how people's different techniques vary. And Hikala's work has such a Studio Ghibli style, and there is I have a few Studio Ghibli books as well. There is one later in this video, that it's just really, it's such a delight to see. And one of the things that's nice about this art book is that she talks about her techniques, she talks about her execution of the work and how she goes from a starting product to a finalized idea, and that is really, really nice to see. And there's also some really beautiful massive spreads in here. I really like when an art book goes above and beyond and shows me lots of different techniques, lots of different things that a person does. And it is really, really, really nice to read this book, and I was really grateful that I was able to back this Kickstarter. I gained a fair few art books this year, so I'm going to have to cut back for next year because I don't have a lot of room in my collection anymore. But this is definitely a must for anyone's collection. Now, I'm going to talk about Disney art books. There is a lot of modern Disney art books, and every time a Disney film is released, they release an art book. I have a fair few in my collection now. Every time there is a Disney film that 100% inspires me, I will get the art book. Now, Frozen. I know a lot of people are not a massive fan of Frozen, but Frozen 1 and Frozen 2 has such a beautiful colour story and such a interesting design in its background elements and its design elements. I had to get it. The fact that they built an engine for snow, it's just, my mind boggles every single time. But there is some phenomenal looks into not only how character design was executed for both films, but how they thought about the background elements, and in particular like trees, why they went for rounded shapes, why they've done certain things. And one of the great things about the Disney art books is that it explains the research that went into a process, so you can see like, oh, we went on this trip and we did this. Now, I won't be showing a massive amount of the Frozen 2 art books simply because I know a lot of people have not seen the film yet. If you haven't, just animation wise, it is just, my mind boggles, and I really love the soundtrack. I've got a thing for Idina Menzel. I really do. I love her voice so much. But one thing that really struck me about this particular film was the use of background elements and the research that went into all the costumes and how design elements changed from the first film. And for me, it was just very fascinating, and I wanted to find out a little bit more. And this is the latest art book in my collection. I am not getting any more art books for this year. I have said no more. Next year, I think I'm limiting myself to 3. I'm only allowed to buy 3 next year. I think I've bought like 7 this year, and that's far too many. But this, it's a must for anyone's collection. Any of the Disney art books I highly recommend. Some of the older ones are very difficult to get a hold of, but the newer ones are much easier. Now this one, Avatar The Last Airbender is one of my all-time favourite animation shows. If you have not watched it, I highly recommend it. But this art book in particular, for use of character design and research, 100% recommend. It is such a beautiful read, and when you read through and you see like the action that they used and the character design that they used and why they did certain elements and like the research for the sketching, it's just, my mind blows. It is such an these art books, I use them as an inspiration point for my work to show that sometimes your first idea is not the best idea, and you can continue your research and your design elements. Like this, look at the creature fusion designs. It's just art. It's just so wonderful, and it's so inspiring to look at. And it's like, I want to understand how stuff is done. I'm fascinated by how stuff is done, and this is one of the older art books in my collection. Actually, I've had this one for about 7 years. The second I watched the show, I really wanted all the art books. I do have one of the Legend of Korra art books, which is the final book one, just because that last series is just wonderful for design elements. It's just really nice to see. But I really like to see that the concept work as well, and that's what's really good about this art book. This is one that I recommend to a lot of people, just because you can see like the use of action that they use within the characters, and it really speaks on that sort of design element, and it is such a beautiful read. If any of these books in this collection you do get, I recommend this 100%. It is one of my favourite art books in my collection, and I cannot gush over it enough. Next up in the collection is, of course, a Studio Ghibli one. This is Howl's Moving Castle. I have a total of 3, I believe. Let me double check. Yes, I have 3 Studio Ghibli art books in my collection, and each one of them are my favourite all-time films. Now, Howl's Moving Castle in particular, I love the story by Diana Wayne Jones. It is a really beautiful read, very different from the animation. If you haven't read the book, it's one of my favourite reads. I recommend it. It's very funny, charming, witty, and the trilogy is phenomenal. But this in particular is a very beautiful book. Now, one thing that's very different about the Studio Ghibli books in comparison to other art books is it shows a lot of the design elements, but it also includes quite a bit of storyboarding and a script as well. Personally, I prefer an art book to have a lot more of the design elements and talking about the design work of a show, how they go from a starting to a finished product. But nevertheless, this is a really beautiful art book. Especially when it talks about the background elements and the design elements for overall. But there's just some really beautiful stills from the show in here. In particular, my favourite scene is when Howl is laying in bed and there is trinkets and all the stuff around it. Just look at that for a still from a piece of animation. It is so beautiful. Apologies for a lot of glare in this video as well. A lot of these books are very shiny. I don't know why a lot of people go for a gloss paper. I don't like gloss paper myself. I prefer a luster finish, or satin, but you know, that's just me. Now, last but certainly not least in this video is one of the pinnacle books in my collection. The Art of Hunchback of Notre Dame. Hunchback of Notre Dame is up there with my favourite Disney films. And yes, there are 2 Disney books in this collection. Please don't sue me. But I wanted to show the difference between a more modern Disney book and an older Disney art book. This book was, it's in my list of like art books I had to get. I need to get Prince of Egypt in my collection and Treasure Planet, Mulan and Tarzan in my collection. But unfortunately, because a lot of these books are discontinued, they are fairly difficult to get a hold of. And quite a few of these books in my collection are secondhand. This is why I have quite a large collection, because when I started collecting, I got a lot of them secondhand. Now, Hunchback of Notre Dame is... music score is phenomenal, animation is amazing, and it is such a beautiful film. I cannot gush over it enough. But one thing that is very, very different, you will notice from the more modern Disney art books to these art books, is it includes a lot more of the sketching process. It shows a lot more of the roughness of the of like the character designs, and there's a lot of charcoal drawings in here, and it is really, really beautiful to look at. Now this is quite it's one of the harder books to get hold of in this video, but just look at that for like atmospheric, scenic, just I just can't. I could talk about art books and concept work for hours, because it's such an important element of any work, any design work that you're looking at, from animation to games to books to anything. There is a lot of concept that goes before a finished product, and this is what art books are fantastic to look into to understand process. So that is all the books that I can recommend. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments section down below. I'll leave links to all the books as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit different from normal, but it's been a highly requested video that I just had to do for you guys. Have a wonderful day, draw, have lots of fun, and as always folks, stay creative.